We look into the all important settled status that is being piloted as we speak, and we now have some legislation that's providing the framework for that. We're asking the question: settled status, but still unsettled lives. Is the introduction of this legislation, the changes to the immigration legislation, are they enough? Are they sufficient? And quite fundamentally, what is the law in action going to be, and how can we assert our rights and protect their rights in practice? We finally had a statement of changes in the immigration rules. So legislation was enacted, as I was mentioning earlier on, and that has put in place and set in motion the settled status process, which, as we're going to say, is being piloted, and a number of issues are coming up, but at least it's in place. And I think it will be very useful to contrast the fact that we have this legislation here in the UK vis-a-vis the European Union, which may have taken a proactive approach in relation to other issues, but has, first of all, not unilaterally recognized the rights of UK citizens in the EU. And it has not, individual member states have not yet legislated. Perhaps we're beginning to see some development in that respect, but they haven't necessarily legislated in the way that the UK has legislated with the settled status. So I suppose, if there is uncertainty here, a fortiori that is the case in Europe for British in the EU.
We know now from the latest Eurostat statistics that 79% of British people living in the EU are of working age and below. It includes children born and raised in the EU, people who occupy a range of positions in the labour market, British people of colour. The British population abroad, just as in the UK, are not exclusively white. And the list goes on. And there are multiple reasons for their migration. Simply, there is nothing singular about the British migrant experience. And I use migrant here very deliberately to indicate that Britain has, for a long time, even if it has forgotten, been an emigrant nation. It actually has one of the largest emigrant populations per capita in the world. It's within the top 5 and has been for a long time. Even if so I want to draw attention to that diversity of experience, the plurality of experience that is masked by the stereotypes. So the citizens' rights negotiations in particular focus on what the removal of EU citizenship and the reciprocal rights relating to this mean for those who are settled. And it concerns and legislates particularly for populations who are settled, just as we would expect from a piece of legislation that is founded on freedom of movement, which was essentially a mechanism to facilitate and support settlement of populations. But beyond this, we know that there are complex circumstances that support residence or presence in other EU countries. In the case of the British people that I've been working with in France, these might include access to exportable benefits from the UK, particularly in the case of people who are in receipt of disability living allowance or personal independence planning, although my information from speaking to them is that they haven't actually yet been transferred to personal independence planning, which in itself is interesting, and of course pensions. It's also clear that for some people, their lives and livelihoods have been built on being able to move freely between EU member states, which, to my knowledge, as yet has not been resolved. So these are people who may live in one country and provide services across borders within the EU. And so
also connection with citizens' rights. Conor Gerty, in a similar context like this, a few months ago at the British Academy, when discussing the future of human rights in the UK in the context of Brexit, basically predicted that at the end of the day, the UK government is not going to take that drastic measure of repealing the Human Rights Act. It will rather restrict its scope, restrict its effect. So it's not going to apply. It's not going to apply to foreigners, including EU citizens. So that's how many of the rights that we have might actually be taken away. And this would, if I can put it this way, quite blatantly satisfy the Eurosceptic monster, which has already swallowed EU membership and I think still has the appetite to come towards the Human Rights Act.
Of finding that the most vulnerable people are not the people who are shouting. They're the people who are scared to even come forwards to find out what their rights are in the first place, for fear that they do not have those rights. And I think that that's a really clear message. And this is before Brexit has happened. I think that working in the midst of Brexit, we already think that something's happened, but we're already seeing people's lives turned upside down as they are found to not meet the terms on which they thought they were able to be in the places where they are. So I think that we're going to have to pay very close attention to that. I should also stress that even before Brexit, there were considerable instabilities in freedom of movement. There were considerable inequalities within European Union citizenship. What we're seeing now is those amplified on a grander scale. They always existed there, but there was a mantle that was held over it that made people believe through this terminology of freedom of movement that it was open to everybody and accessible to everybody. And we know that it wasn't.